Good morning. Thank you all for being here. We're here today to identify and announce charges against a Russian national whom the Department of Justice alleges is responsible for two of the worst computer hacking and bank fraud schemes of the past decade. The charges we're announcing today are merely allegations, and each of the defendants is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Maxim Yakubets of Moscow, Russia, has been indicted in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for his alleged role as the leader of a cyber criminal gang responsible for the distribution of a multifunction malware package known as Bugat. Bugat was designed to automate the theft of confidential personal information and financial information, such as online banking credentials, from infected computers. Later versions of the malware, also known as Dridex, were designed with the added function of assisting in the installation of ransomware. Over the past decade, the Bugat malware facilitated the theft of millions of dollars from victims, some of which occurred as recently as May of this year. A second co-conspirator, Igor Turashev, also was indicted in Pittsburgh in connection with the Bugat scheme. Yakubets has also been charged in a criminal complaint in Lincoln, Nebraska, for his participation in a scheme to disseminate Zeus, a similar form of malware that was likewise used to empty out the financial accounts of its victims. According to the complaint, the deployment of Zeus resulted in a total attempted theft of around $220 million, with actual losses of an estimated $70 million from victims' bank accounts. Yakubets is a true 21st century criminal who, with the stroke of a key and the click of a mouse, committed cyber crimes across the globe. He's earned his place on the FBI's list of the world's most wanted cyber criminals. To that end, our colleagues from the State Department will have an announcement in a few minutes that will further our collective efforts to bring Yakubets to justice. A little bit of detail about the malware deployed by Yakubets and his co-conspirators. Both forms of the malware intercept passwords and other private information that can be used to conduct wire transfers. The malware then initiates or redirects wire transfers from victim bank accounts to foreign bank accounts controlled by the criminals. Because many of the victims of both Bugat and Zeus are small and mid-sized businesses, their accounts typically do not have the same legal protections afforded to consumer accounts, so some of the losses involved were particularly devastating. Yakubets and his co-conspirators did not discriminate either in their choice of targets. For example, the Nebraska complaint alleges that Yakubets was directly involved in the theft of tens of thousands of dollars from a religious order of Franciscan sisters. Yakubets and the members of his criminal network devised and implemented the kinds of criminal schemes so audacious and sophisticated that they would be difficult to imagine if they were not real. Sitting quietly at computer terminals far, far away, these cyber criminals allegedly stole tens of millions of dollars from unwitting members of our business, nonprofit, governmental, and religious communities. Each and every one of these computer intrusions was effectively a cyber-enabled bank robbery. We take crimes like this extremely seriously, and will do everything in our power to hold these criminals accountable for their crimes. The Justice Department, federal prosecutors, FBI agents and analysts, and foreign law enforcement authorities in a number of different jurisdictions all work together to unmask Yakubets and his co-conspirators. The assistance provided by numerous private sector partners was likewise invaluable, but I also want to especially thank our foreign law enforcement partners who are on stage here today from the United Kingdom. The National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police Service of the UK conducted their own investigation into the harms that the Zeus and Bugat viruses caused to the UK victims. But these folks also provided invaluable assistance to our investigations here in the United States as well. The UK also extradited two of Yakubets' co-conspirators in the Zeus scheme to the United States to face justice. Yakubets allegedly has been engaged in cybercrime on an almost unimaginable scale for over a decade. Where our goal is to be able to identify the perpetrators of these crimes in rapid fashion, the reality of law enforcement work is that a quick resolution of these cases cannot always happen. But make no mistake, we will doggedly pursue cyber criminals until we can bring them to justice. Today's announcement should make clear to those engaged in cybercrime that we will identify you, we will unmask you, and we will prosecute you, no matter how much effort it requires or how long it might take. You will never have safe haven from the efforts of the United States law enforcement and our international partners to bring you to justice. And to that end, I want to thank the United States Attorney's Office from the Western District of Pennsylvania, the United States Attorney's Office from the from the District of Nebraska, the FBI, the State Department, and the UK's National Crime Agency and Metropolitan Police Service, all of which are represented behind me by individuals and leaders of those particular institutions. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Brady of the Western District of Pennsylvania, the United States Attorney there, to make some remarks.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. Today, we have announced an indictment out of the Western District of Pennsylvania against two of the most prolific cyber criminals in the world. Maxim Yakubets and Igor Turashev have spent the last decade infecting computers worldwide with the Bugat, Krydex, and Drydex malware. Companies and citizens of the Western District of Pennsylvania have been targeted and defrauded by these cyber criminals. Maxim Yakubets, also known as Aqua, is the leader of the Bugat, Krydex, Drydex malware and botnet conspiracy. He oversees and manages the development, maintenance, distribution, and infection of malware. Igor Turashev, also known as Enki or Nintutu, is a close associate of Yakubets and serves as the system administrator, has oversight over botnets, and manages internal systems used by the criminal group. Together, these two criminals have victimized our district and the world at large. Some of the victims in Western Pennsylvania include a school district, two banking institutions, a number of businesses, including a petroleum business, a technology company, a manufacturing company, and a building materials supply company. The Drydex malware conspiracy was a constantly evolving and adapting criminal enterprise that had a level of sophistication and scope of threat that we rarely see. And this conspiracy was marked by constant innovation. Even as we disrupted Jabber Zeus malware conspiracy, the Game Over Zeus, we prosecuted one of Drydex's system administrators in 2015 named Andrei Ginkel. We sinkholed sub-botnets for this conspiracy in 2016, including, and we also indicted a Belarus money mule network in 2016. In spite of all of these efforts by law enforcement, they continued to adapt and innovate. They went from centralized command and control systems to peer-to-peer botnets. They used more sophisticated web injects. They increased their use of encryption and enhanced security methods. And they changed from the use of international wire transfers to ransomware and cryptocurrency to private accounts. And this is why this has been the most widespread and destructive malware and banking Trojans in the world over the last decade. I do want to say a quick word about victims. You know, at the Department of Justice, we are charged with enforcing the laws of the United States and seeking justice. But our calling is to protect our fellow citizens and our friends and our neighbors. And the first Western Pennsylvania victim was Sharon High School. Sharon, Pennsylvania is a small steel town, and I actually had family members who have attended and graduated from Sharon. And we know that for every dollar stolen from a school district, that's one less dollar that they have for the high school football team or the girls basketball team, one less dollar for teachers' salaries or for special education. For every dollar stolen from an individual, that's one less dollar they have for their retirement, one less dollar they have for their children's education or for a family vacation. And for every dollar stolen from a company, that's one less dollar to innovate, to create new products, to enter new markets, or to hire those same friends and neighbors. And this is why we go to the ends of the earth to investigate and prosecute cyber criminals. These are the cyber criminals who victimize our citizens, and we will pursue them and we will prosecute them, whether these criminals are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or in Minsk, or in Moscow. I'd like to echo Brian's thanks to our international partners, especially NCA, but I'd especially like to recognize for the Western Pennsylvania indictment the outstanding work of Assistant U.S. Attorney Shardul Desai, and the work, I'm sorry, Joe, of the best cyber group in the FBI and the field office of Pittsburgh. Now we're going to hear from Joe Kelly, who's the U.S. Attorney from Nebraska.
Thank you. In the District of Nebraska, the complaint against Yakubets and his co-conspirators refers to 3 different Nebraska bank accounts belonging to small businesses. And to emphasize, that's just the Nebraska aspect for the victims. The conspiracy is much broader than that and into other states. But as to those 3 Nebraska intended victims, 2 were averted. In those cases, there were no losses associated with the 2 businesses, but there was an actual loss of $159,000 with regard to the 3rd. That's just in the state of Nebraska. But as has been said, the actual losses to all victims in the various states is estimated at nearly $70 million. The methodology was similar each time. Infect the business computer, obtain bank account numbers and security codes, and initiate electronic fund transfers to money mules overseas. We appreciate the hard work and the intelligent approach to this investigation by all of the Justice Department, U.S. law enforcement agencies, and their partners around the world. I want to recognize the important role played by the Omaha FBI office in this investigation from its inception. This is a great example of the ongoing teamwork of law enforcement in the international community and clearly demonstrates the resolve to hold these criminals accountable. When someone hears about a case like this, very often the first response is, well, there's nothing you can really do about these. Today, we're here to demonstrate that we can and will.
Good morning. As you know, the FBI is charged with defending United States citizens and businesses against a wide range of cyber crimes. We face cyber threats from hackers for hire, organized criminal syndicates, and overseas adversaries like the individuals that are indicted today. With today's announcement, we're launching a wide-ranging disruption operation targeting Maxim Yakubets and, by proxy, his group of co-conspirators that he leads. Over a 10-year period, Yakubets, also known as Aqua, and his co-conspirators have operated and improved multiple malware variants to go after as many victims as possible. And they enrich themselves through theft, fraud, and deceit. They spread their malware primarily through phishing email spam campaigns. They cause losses in excesses of tens of millions of dollars, with attempted thefts ranging in the hundreds of millions of dollars. These malware variants affected thousands of U.S. American victims. They include a dairy company in Ohio, to a luggage store in New Mexico, and even an order of religious sisters, as the Assistant Attorney General noted previously. I want to emphasize a few key points that cases like this demonstrate. First, they show the evolution of cybercriminals and their capabilities over the past several years and how persistent these cybercriminals are. In this case, we have individuals and groups using different tools, tactics, and techniques over time, and they adapted them to effectively evolve their scams. Second, these cases show that cybercriminals have banded together. They're leveraging each other's strengths and forming organized criminal syndicates to more effectively victimize our public. Which brings me to the third point. To successfully combat them, we as law enforcement partners must do the same. We must come together, partner closely, and leverage each other's strengths. We must integrate and innovate to combat these cyber criminals globally. And that's just what we've done here As you've heard, the FBI would also like to thank its partners from certainly the Department of Justice, the Department of State, the Treasury Department, and the UK's National Crime Agency. Strong national and international partnerships are important to these cyber investigations. As we've often said publicly, cyber criminals disregard borders, be they states or countries. This often requires an international response like the one you're seeing here today. In the case of Yakubits, the FBI has worked hand in hand with the National Crime Agency in sharing investigative information and intelligence information for nearly a decade. Why nearly a decade? Because these cases are incredibly complex, and the networks that perpetrate them are very complex and sometimes global. These are sophisticated cyber criminals operating complex variants, so investigations of this type do take time. Today's announcement demonstrates our resolve in bringing cyber criminals and their activities to light. Because these criminals are in Russia, some may ask, why pursue them? You may never get your hands on them. It's difficult, no doubt, but it's not impossible, as we have shown time and time again over the past number of years. The long arm of the law, and I do like that term, it does stretch throughout the world. And having your name, your face, or your description on a wanted poster makes moving around freely much more difficult. So we're going to keep at it, because collectively, the FBI and our partners, we have a very long memory, and we will never give up. We have a track record of success when it comes to catching cyber criminals throughout the globe. Simply naming them in an indictment accomplishes a great deal. We know that through many forms and fashion, through many methods. State sponsors and other clients prize hackers for their anonymity, deniability, and their stealth. Calling these actors out publicly through these indictments strips away that anonymity. Other parts of our government can use the information developed through our investigations to impose additional costs, like financial sanctions or revoking the ability to travel. And finally, a charging document is a key step in achieving justice for the victims. We could not have gotten this far in our case without the cooperation of the victims. And I think sometimes we think about financial impact. That's significant, but we also have to remember there are people behind that financial impact. We understand that companies and institutions are under immense pressure during and certainly after cyber attacks. And they may be reluctant to report these breaches, but we urge all victims to contact their local field office, their local FBI field office, as soon as possible once they realize they've been hacked. And we encourage our victims to file a detailed report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at www.ic3.gov. The FBI may be able to provide additional information or help during and certainly after an attack. You too can help us fight these attacks. We all need to do our part to make sure that our systems are as secure as possible. There's no guarantee against exploitation for anyone, but we cannot stress enough the importance of cyber hygiene and preventative measures that we can take. Time and time again, we find that not following the basics of cyber hygiene makes us more vulnerable and allows us to be more easily exploited. For guidance and information on improving your cyber hygiene and the security of your systems, please visit www.ic3.gov. We have to do whatever we can together to lay hands on these criminals to deter others from joining them. I do want to not only thank our partners, but I would like to thank the efforts of our agents and our analysts from the FBI, certainly our partners as well. They worked very hard, but my own people. We appreciate your diligence. These cases are very difficult. They're tedious and they're technical, and they require tenacity and resolve. Thank you.
The efforts to bring Maxine Yakubits to justice is a high priority for the United States, and the State Department is pleased to be part of this joint effort. The fact that all our agencies and the United Kingdom are represented here today underscores how closely we work together. we bring the unique tools and authorities of our respective agencies to bear against transnational criminals and transnational criminal organizations that threaten American interest and our people. There's this one particular State Department tool that we are applying here today, and that is the Transnational Organized Crime Rewards Program. Through this program, we're pleased to announce a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest and or conviction of Russian cybercriminal Maxim Yakubets. Considering the staggering cost, cybercrimes are a significant national security threat to the United States. And the Transnational Organized Crime Rewards Program is one of the many tools that the State Department uses to bring cybercriminals to justice. As my counterparts have already stated, today's action is one step to ensure that cybercriminals like Maxim Yakubets cannot hide from justice. We will continue working together to protect Americans from these threats. And now I'd like to turn it over to our UK colleague from the National Crime Agency, Director of Threat Leadership, Robert Jones.
So thank you, and thank you to colleagues from the United States for inviting me here today to talk about this investigation, which is a landmark in the history of the NCA and for international collaboration in tackling cybercrime. There is a long story that sits behind what you see today, and I'm really pleased to see the true identity of Aqua being unveiled and to see that people are being held to account for their actions. This is the start of us beginning to deal with the harm that's been caused by these individuals, and the story that sits behind this goes back many years. In the UK, whilst we've been trying to degrade the threat posed by the organisation that we've been investigating, we have already succeeded in convicting 8 individuals, and over 40 years' worth of prison sentences have been delivered. We see the very real harm that's been caused to victims in the UK by groups like this, and that manifests itself with real-world victims. As colleagues have already described, behind these sophisticated attacks and behind the cynical online monikers which people use to disguise their identity, there is real-world harm where people's life savings, people's companies are being compromised by these individuals. We estimate that at least 300 different organisations in 43 countries have been affected by these attacks, and that will be an underestimate. We think that there are tens of millions of pounds, dollars, which have been recognised by this organised crime group, which they have tried to draw down through financial institutions. The fundamental weakness that organised crime has is that they are driven by money and they are driven by greed. And we have been able to gain evidence in the UK of a real-world footprint of people seeking to draw down the funds from these offences, and also people who are exhibiting a very extravagant lifestyle online. There is a rich irony in the story which you will see over the coming days, where many of the individuals who we believe are involved in this type of activity, who have exploited the online vulnerability of normal citizens in the UK and around the world, have themselves shown a vulnerability online. And it's by exploiting that vulnerability and by seeking evidence over many, many years and being able to meticulously, over 9 years' worth of activity, piece together a trail of breadcrumbs which leads you back to real-world identities. That has shown that some of these people have made significant mistakes online. And it's through those mistakes and exploiting those mistakes that we have evidence which we've been able to share with colleagues, which has allowed a range of options to be delivered by our colleagues in the US. And I'm very proud to be sitting alongside an agency like with the heritage of the FBI and delivering this sort of briefing to you all. This is a multi-agency effort. It's involved numerous departments in the US. It's involved numerous departments in the UK. And I'd like to pay tribute to the efforts of the Metropolitan Police, the National Cybersecurity Centre, and others who have stuck with this long game for many, many years. I'd also like to commend the small team back in the UK, who I know will be watching this, for the efforts they have made. There is a fundamental point around cybercrime and tackling the harm caused by cybercrime, where many will say, as colleagues have already pointed out, you are wasting your time trying to arrest people, you are wasting your time trying to deliver evidence about who are behind these events. That is plain wrong. We will extend our reach, we have a long memory, and we will relentlessly pursue individuals online until we identify their identity, until we get a real-world footprint, and then we will take the best route to bring them to justice. Thank you.
Who's controlling time here?
Can I just, question for Mr. Bowditch. Can you describe a little bit more the campaign you mentioned to disrupt these networks going forward?
The campaign that I mentioned? The campaign I mentioned was the spear phishing campaigns. This
I was now taking steps to degrade this network, is that right?
I don't remember that, but I may have. But what I will tell you is, look, again, back to the no borders issue. We continue to evolve our cyber crimes program to attack these folks wherever they are. The fact that the National Crime Agency is here and we had such a good partnership with them, and they work so hard and so well together in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement and U.S. prosecutors. It's amazing the indictment that you're seeing, and I would refer you to the charging instruments that are put forth here today. You can learn a lot from those charging instruments, the general public as well, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yes, you mentioned that there were tangential, I don't remember the specific wording, connections to the Russian government. How extensive are those connections? Did the Russian government profit from any of this ill-gotten money?
That I know I did not mention, and I would refer you to the charging document.
Mr. Benchikowski, can you tell us, based on what you've all done today, have you put these people out of business, or are they still capable of striking other victims?
That's a great question, Pete. The short answer is, and one of the reasons why we did this today was to raise awareness for potential additional victims down the road. We have victims as recent as May of this year who were victimized by this malware. And so it is fair to say that they are not out of business at this point, but that is our ultimate goal.
Will these victims ever get their money back?
There is a forfeiture complaint, forfeiture count in the Pittsburgh complaint, and so that is our aim, is to follow the money wherever we can. How successful we're able to be in that time will tell.
Is there anything that they can do to protect themselves from this type of crime moving forward?
Dave, you want to take that? Yeah.
Yes, and then I want to come back and clean up my answer to your question a little bit. Yes, first of all, again, back to the basics. Change your password, two-factor authentication, something you should have and something you should know is the best way to explain two-factor authentication. Change your passwords, make them challenging and difficult. Make sure you are aware of them, and then certainly do not click on certain links unless you know the source. That is where people are getting caught time and time and time again, both in their personal business but also in the actual companies. This is occurring on a regular basis.
Is there a commonality on that point
To the attachments that draw people in, make them want to click the attachment? Is there any one standard methodology of the attachment, or?
They've evolved it, and I wouldn't say there's any significant commonality. Look for legitimate. Before you click, think hard. That's the best advice I can give to people on that. And I want to come back to your question on connections to the Russian government. Right now, we're here today just to focus on what is in the four corners of this document.
Where are these two men believed to be now, and when was the last time law enforcement saw them moving online?
We believe they're in Russia.
They said that Yakubich provides direct assistance to the Russian government and that he worked for the FSB in 2017. So was he involved in the Russian interference efforts in the U.S. presidential election?
I'm going to refer you again to the four corners of the charging document, and I'm going to allow the Treasury announcement to stand on its own. Yes, sir.
Speaking of the complaint, there's a reference in the complaint to a Washington Post story about one of these victims. And then there's a long series of conversations among the alleged conspirators talking about that story. I'm just curious, what is the evidentiary value of having these people say, you know, oh, look, there's a story about us. I guess we're in trouble now.
I would refer that. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I think for a better answer that on that one, I'm going to refer that to one of the U.S. attorneys.
Could you be more?
Yeah, sorry, could I have a question, please, for Director Jones? In the process of monitoring these two, can you tell us anything about their lifestyle? Obviously, they've become rather wealthy in the process. So what can you tell us in terms of what you know about them and what they've been doing with this cash?
So we've been able to identify an online presence for associates of these individuals, and we'll be releasing some material in relation to that, which gives you a very good pen portrait of their behaviour and the type of lifestyle they lead, which is cash-rich, fast cars, behaving and acting like very flamboyant and extravagant millionaires.
They're quite bold and, as you say, a flash lifestyle, so quite obvious in terms of living the life of rich men in Russia.
You may say that.
Director Jones, can we just verify some of the figures you threw out earlier? You said worldwide there's roughly 300 victims in 45 countries?
So it's much more than 300 victims. So some of the victims are organisations, some of the victims are individuals, so there'll be thousands of victims in relation to this activity. The estimate is a low estimate, around 300 organisations and 43 different countries where this malware has had an impact.
Any idea the total dollar or pound value of what they've gotten?
No, I can't say for certain, but it will be hundreds of millions probably worldwide.
And 18 people have, in the UK, have been...
8 people. 8 people and 40 years worth of prison sentences delivered already.
Convicted.
They have.
The Senate Minority Leader the other day issued a statement where he was told by the FBI that these new facial recognition software, which is a fun game, it was a Russian developer where you can make yourself look older or younger, may be a phishing expedition. Is that, I can't remember the name of the app, is it in any way related to what these two are doing?
Let me step in and give you a non-answer because I'm not familiar with that. I can get back to you on that one. Yes.
For U.S. Attorney Brady, in 2016, Smilex was cooperating. Can you talk about whether his cooperation led to the indictment today or how valuable that was?
No, sorry, I can't talk about that.
Can you talk about, you mentioned a number of these activities that were averted, or at least attempted attacks that were averted. How were they averted? How did the victim recognize that they were about to be victimized?
Well, without going beyond what is in the indictment, there's an ongoing collaboration and partnership between the public and private sectors. So there's constant flow of information. I think the ICCC was mentioned. So when we are aware of threats, again, either the public sector or the private sector, we are sharing that information in real time so that they have the information that they need in a timely way to combat it.
Have your Russian counterparts been cooperating with this investigation?
The Russian government did provide a response to a mutual legal assistance treaty request. It was a response that was helpful in the investigation to a point. To a point, yes. And I want to come back and I want to more holistically answer your question about the conversation regarding the Washington Post article. I think the lesson that you learn from that is an indictment that's very public, a complaint, and/or good reporting unmasks these folks, and they do watch from afar. So I think once again it demonstrates why those types of actions are so important. And as you saw from the conversation, they didn't like it that they were unmasked.
Can you go into any more detail about the communications with the Russian government? Was this done at the State Department level, through law enforcement channels?
I'm not going to go into any more detail on it.
What about ransomware attacks? Some of you mentioned that they were responsible for that. You have any idea how many ransomware attacks they carried out in the U.S.?
I do not. I know there was thousands of people that were victimized in the U.S. I do not know the actual number, though.